That is her. She has been refusing to comply since the gate. I want her removed before this flight pushes back. The words landed hard in the pressurized air of the first-class cabin. Not whispered, not uncertain. Delivered like an order that had already been decided before anyone bothered to check the facts. Karen Hollis stood at the edge of the aisle, one hand braced against the overhead bin, her gate agent uniform pressed tight across her shoulders. She pointed, not gestured pointed, at seat 2A with the confidence of someone who had never once been told she was wrong in 22 years of doing this job. 2 armed security officers flanked her. Their boots were heavy against the cabin carpet. Their radios crackled low and constant, filling the silence that had settled over the forward section like something dropped from a great height. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A man in the front row set down his glass of sparkling water, the ice still clicking against the crystal. A woman across the aisle removed her reading glasses slowly, deliberately, the kind of movement that meant she was paying full attention. Somewhere 3 rows back, a phone lifted. Slow, instinctive. The entire cabin leaned in without moving. And then everyone's eyes found her. The woman in seat 2A. She had not moved. Not an inch. Her back was straight against the leather, one hand resting lightly on the armrest, the other still holding a thin glass of water. Condensation traced a slow line down the side of the glass, catching the soft overhead light and breaking it into something almost gentle. Her expression was still. Not the stillness of shock, not the stillness of fear, but the particular stillness of someone who had already decided what they were going to do and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. Her name was Nadia Brooks, and what Karen Hollis did not know, what none of them knew. Not the 2 officers with their hands near their belts, not the lead flight attendant already moving out of the galley, not the 112 passengers watching from their seats. Was that in exactly 14 minutes, Karen Hollis would be escorted off this aircraft. So would the flight attendant who backed her up. So would the security officer who issued the countdown, all 3 of them, gone, removed from duty in the cabin they thought they controlled, and the woman sitting quietly in seat 2A. She would not move an inch. Nadia Brooks was 44 years old. She was wearing a dark blazer, simple, perfectly tailored, but not flashy, the kind of thing you bought because it lasted, not because it announced anything. Dark trousers. Flat shoes with a faint scuff at the left toe that she had noticed that morning and decided not to worry about. A small leather laptop bag was tucked beneath the ottoman at her feet, the leather worn soft at the corners from 3 years of use. No logo, no jewelry except a thin watch on her left wrist. Functional, not decorative. Nothing about her appearance said anything louder than, this is a woman who has somewhere to be and plans to get there. She looked to anyone who was not paying close attention like someone's quiet professional contact. A consultant, maybe. A professor. Someone competent and unremarkable in the way that only certain kinds of people are ever allowed to be unremarkable. She did not look according to the silent calculus being run by the woman who had pointed at her like someone who belonged in seat 2A of first class on Meridian Air Flight 408 to Seattle. That calculus had been running since the gate. The lead security officer, Travis Meade, 47 years old, broad through the shoulders, jaw set like someone who had decided the outcome before the conversation began, shifted his stance in the aisle. He glanced at Karen. Karen gave a short, firm nod. The kind of nod that said, I have handled my part. Finish it. Travis looked back at Nadia. On what grounds, she asked. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It moved through the cabin like something with weight behind it, and for just a moment, just a fraction, the forward section of Meridian Air Flight 408 went absolutely, completely still. Travis Meade opened his mouth to answer, and 14 minutes from now he would wish he had made a different choice. Because what Karen Hollis had set in motion at Gate K-22 with one pointed finger, 22 years of unchecked habit and a certainty so old it had stopped feeling like a choice, was not going to end the way she expected. It was going to end with her walking off the aircraft she had just tried to clear. It was going to end with the truth already recorded, already uploading, already moving faster than any of them could follow. And it was going to end with Nadia Brooks sitting in seat 2, a laptop open exactly where she had always belonged. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us go back 40 minutes. Let us go back to Gate K22. The terminal lights at O'Hare always had that particular quality in the early morning. Not warm, not cold, just relentless. The kind of light that did not flatter anything and was not trying to. It bounced off the polished floor in long, pale streaks and lit up the departure board in stark white numerals that listed delays the way a doctor reads test results factual without apology. Gate K22 was running 12 minutes behind. Nadia had known that before she arrived. She had checked the app in the car. She had checked it again walking through security. Not because she was anxious. Anxiety was something she had learned to metabolize a long time ago, turning it into information rather than feeling, but because she liked to know the shape of what she was walking into. She always arrived early, not because she needed the extra time, because she liked to watch. She settled into a seat near the far end of the gate area, back straight, ankles crossed, the leather laptop bag resting against her leg. She opened her phone briefly, not to scroll, not to distract herself, to review a set of numbers she had been building for 3 weeks. Audit data, passenger complaint records cross-referenced with gate agent shift logs, patterns that most people would have needed a spreadsheet to see. Nadia saw them the way some people read a room instinctively, immediately, before anyone said a word. She locked the screen and let the phone rest in her palm. Then she looked up. This was audit number 13. In the past 8 months, Nadia had moved through 12 airports, not as an executive, not with an entourage or an advance team, or a pre-cleared VIP escort. She had moved through them the way the people in her company's complaint files had moved through them alone, undeclared, wearing nothing that announced her rank. She had stood in lines. She had waited at counters. She had watched carefully and without comment how the people who worked for her treated the people who trusted them. 11 of those 12 audits had produced findings she had not wanted to see, but had not been surprised by. Today was Audit 13, O'Hare, Gate K22, Meridian Air Flight 408. She had booked Seat 2A. Behind the gate counter, Karen Hollis moved with the efficiency of long habit. 22 years. That was the number she carried the way other people carried titles, not as a credential exactly, but as a kind of armor. 22 years meant she had seen everything. 22 years meant her instincts were honed. 22 years meant that when something felt off, it was off. She did not need the system to confirm what she already knew. She was 51 years old with silver streaks at her temples that she had not bothered to color in 3 years, and a posture so rigid it looked like she had been standing at that counter since the building was constructed. Her uniform sat perfectly across her shoulders. Her smile, when she deployed it, was bright and practiced and absolutely selective. "Mr. Patterson," she called out, her voice lifting with genuine warmth as a man in an expensive overcoat approached the counter. She did not need to check his boarding pass to know his name. He flew this route 11 times a year, always first class, always the aisle. "Good to see you again. How was London?" The man smiled without really looking at her. "Wet," he said. She laughed. Small, appropriate, completely comfortable. She scanned his pass in a single practiced motion, returned it without breaking eye contact, and said, "Right this way, sir. We will have you settled shortly." The smile lingered at the edge of her face as he moved past. Then it was gone. Her eyes swept the waiting area again. Not casually. The way a person does when they have been making the same quiet calculation every day for 2 decades without ever having to name what they are looking for. Sorting. Always sorting. Who fit the picture, who did not? Who belonged in the line she was about to open, who needed to be redirected somewhere more appropriate? It took less than a second per person. She had gotten very good at it. Nadia watched it happen from across the gate area. She had seen it before. Different airports, different faces, same architecture of assumption running beneath the surface like a current you could not see until something got caught in it. She kept her expression neutral. She tucked the observation away beside the 11 others like it, and she waited for the boarding announcement. At the far edge of the seating area, a young man sat with his phone tilted at a casual angle, a travel vlogger's instinct for framing shots without looking like he was framing shots. His name was Marco Rivera, 26 years old, wearing clean white sneakers and a jacket that said he cared about how he looked without trying too hard. He had 340,000 subscribers, and the particular skill of being present without being intrusive, of documenting things the way a good witness does accurately, without embellishment. He was not filming yet. He was just watching. 2 seats away from Marco, a woman named Patricia Cole adjusted the strap of her carry-on and smoothed the floral scarf at her collar. She was 67 years old, with reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, and the careful, observant quality of someone who had lived long enough to know the difference between a minor inconvenience and something that deserved attention. She was also watching Karen Hollis, not because she had decided anything yet, because something in the way the gate agent's smile worked, who it was for who it was not, registered in some deep place as a small, specific wrongness. The boarding announcement came at 7:42 in the morning. Meridian Air Flight 408 to Seattle. We are now boarding first class and Diamond Elite passengers at Gate K22. The waiting area shifted. People straightened. Jackets were smoothed. Carry-ons were lifted. The subtle theater of status of established hierarchy of people who had learned to wear their entitlement like a second skin. Nadia rose with the same unhurried motion she did everything. She picked up the leather bag, settled the strap across her shoulder, and stepped into the priority line. Second position. There was a man ahead of her. Expensive watch, heavy briefcase, the kind of shoes that cost more than some people's rent. And behind her, Patricia Cole was already moving toward the line as well. Nadia held out her phone as she reached the scanner. Green light. Clean pass. Everything confirmed. Karen Hollis's hand shot out. Hold on. The word was not loud, but it was sharp, specific. A wall that went up in the space between the scanner and the jet bridge door. Nadia stopped. She looked at Karen's hand, then at Karen's face. Is there a problem? She asked. Karen did not answer immediately. Her eyes moved over Nadia the way they moved over everything quickly, thoroughly, with a conclusion already forming before the inspection was done. The blazer. No logo. The bag. Worn soft at the corners. The shoes. Scuffed left toe. The absence of anything that announced. This line is for first-class passengers, Karen said. Her voice had dropped its warmth entirely the way a switch flips. Group 4 will be called shortly. I am first class, Nadia said. Seat 2, A. Karen reached out, not asking, just taking, and lifted the phone from Nadia's hand. She looked at the screen. Her brows tightened. This could be a screenshot, she said. She said it just loud enough for the people behind Nadia to hear. We have had issues with that before. In the line behind Nadia, 2 people exchanged a glance. Marco Rivera's hand moved slightly. His phone was already up the angle, casual, the recording silent. Patricia Cole, 3 positions back, went very still. May I have my phone back? Nadia asked. Karen ignored the request. She turned to her terminal keyboard, rattling under her fingers in sharp, aggressive strokes that filled the silence with manufactured urgency. The system came back quickly. It always came back quickly when the answer was already in there. Name, seat status, paid in full, first class, confirmed. Karen's jaw tightened. For one brief moment, something like uncertainty moved across her face. Then it hardened, calcified, became something more resistant than certainty, became refusal, which is what certainty looks like when the facts will not cooperate. She handed the phone back with slightly too much force. "Your bag," she said, pointing at the leather carry-on. "It looks oversized. You will need to place it in the sizer." Nadia looked at the bag, looked at Karen. Then she stepped to the side, lifted the bag, and placed it into the metal frame with a single, clean motion. It slid in perfectly. Space on all sides. Nothing to argue. Karen was quiet for 1 second too long. "Fine," she said. The word was brittle. "But you have been selected for additional screening." There had been no alert, no flag in the system, no protocol that gave a gate agent the unilateral authority to call for additional screening without cause. Both of them knew it. Nadia stepped onto the red mat. Marco's recording was already running. Patricia Cole watched from the line, her reading glasses now hanging from her fingers, her eyes very clear. The inspection took longer than it should have. Karen worked through the bag methodically, the thoroughness performative rather than procedural. Each item opened slightly longer than necessary, each pocket pressed, each flap unfolded and refolded with a deliberateness that was designed to be seen. A notebook fanned through. A slim laptop removed, turned over, placed on the mat with a sound that was louder than it needed to be. Nadia stood perfectly still through all of it, hands at her sides, shoulders relaxed, her breathing slow and even the way it got when she was doing her best work. Not the breathing of someone who was calm, but the breathing of someone who was very carefully managing how much of themselves they were showing. Her eyes tracked everything. Karen's rhythm, the way her lips pressed together each time the bag failed to produce anything concerning. The way her certainty was starting to fray at the edges, not because she was wrong about wanting Nadia removed, she was still absolutely committed to that, but because the evidence kept refusing to cooperate. Behind them, the line had stalled. A man in a gray suit leaned out slightly. "Is this going to take much longer?" Karen did not look up. "Security procedures take the time they take, sir." It was not an answer. It was a warning. The man leaned back. Karen zipped the bag closed with a sharp pull. The sound of it deliberate final a period at the end of a sentence she had already written, and shoved it back toward Nadia. "You can go," she said, already turning away. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just dismissal, which was its own kind of message. Nadia picked up the bag. Her fingers paused for just one moment on the handle. Then she stepped forward past the scanner into the hollow metal corridor of the jet bridge. Behind her, she heard Karen reach for her radio. She knew what was coming. She had known since the moment Karen's hand first went up. What Karen did not know, what she had no way of knowing, was that everything she had just done was already recorded, already time-stamped, already part of an audit file that had her name in the subject line. Nadia walked down the jet bridge toward the aircraft. Her footsteps were even, controlled, unhurried. She had been here before, different terminal, same architecture of assumption, same quiet insistence that she justify her presence in a space she had every right to occupy. She had learned over a long time not to argue with the architecture. You do not fight the wall by throwing yourself at it. You find the load-bearing beam and you remove it. She was about to find the beam. Karen Hollis did not go back to her counter after Nadia disappeared into the jet bridge. That was the first sign that this was not over. A gate agent's job ends at the aircraft door. Everything beyond the jet bridge belongs to the crew, to the flight deck, to the captain's authority. Karen knew this. 22 years meant she knew every boundary and every gray area and every moment when the rules provided cover and when they did not. She picked up her radio. K22 to forward cabin. Rachel, I need you to flag a passenger. 2A. Female, traveling alone. There is an issue with the reservation. The pause on the other end lasted exactly long enough to mean something. What kind of issue? Rachel Voss's voice came back careful. The kind that needs handling before we push back, Karen said. She kept her voice level professional, the tone of someone reporting a facts-based concern rather than a feeling. 22 years had made her fluent in that particular translation. Another pause. Her pass cleared at the gate, Rachel said. Passes can be manipulated, Karen said. You know that. And I have a diamond elite in row 14 who should have been upgraded 3 weeks ago. He has been loyal to this airline for 11 years. There is no reason that seat should not go to someone who has earned it. The silence that followed was the kind that contains a decision being made. I will handle it, Rachel said. Karen clipped the radio back to her belt and looked at the boarding line, which had resumed moving now that the mat was clear and the bag was gone, and the problem had, for Karen's purposes, been transferred. She smiled at the next passenger, a woman in a fur-trimmed coat who held her boarding pass between 2 manicured fingers like it was something delicate. Welcome aboard, Karen said warmly. Have a wonderful flight. In the gate area, Marco Rivera had not moved yet. He was still waiting for his group to be called, his phone resting on his knee with the screen dark. But his eyes were on the radio at Karen's belt, and something was moving behind his expression. Not anger, yet not certainty, just the quiet alertness of someone who has watched something happen and is deciding whether it means what he thinks it means. He pulled up the footage he had recorded during the screening, watched it back on silent, the phone tilted so the screen was invisible to anyone standing nearby. It was all there. Karen's hand blocking the path, the bag sizer, the extended inspection of items that required no inspection. Karen's face, the jaw tightening when nothing incriminating appeared, the brief moment of recalibration, the decision to manufacture a secondary concern when the primary one dissolved. He had documented enough moments like this to know the shape of what he was looking at. He had also learned in 4 years of travel content that the shape of something and the full truth of something were not always the same. So he kept the phone in his pocket and waited. He would let the moment tell him when it was time. Patricia Cole was already through the gate and moving down the jet bridge when she caught herself slowing down. Something was bothering her. Not the way something dramatic bothers you, not the sudden alarm of a smoke detector, but the slow, persistent way of a sound you cannot identify, a detail that does not fit a note played slightly off-key in an otherwise ordinary piece of music. She thought about the woman at the counter, the boarding pass that had cleared, the bag that had fit perfectly in the sizer. The way Karen's expression had not changed when the evidence failed to support her position, had simply recalibrated, found a new angle, kept going. Patricia was 67 years old. She had been a school teacher for 31 of those years before she retired, which meant she had spent 3 decades being very accurate about when a student was telling the truth and when they were telling a version of the truth that was designed to produce a particular outcome. She knew the difference between someone who had made a mistake and someone who had made a decision and was working backward from it. She stepped into the aircraft and found her seat, 1C window first class, and settled her carry-on beneath the seat in front of her. She kept her reading glasses in her hand, held loosely the way she did when she was paying attention to something. She was waiting to see what happened next. Inside the aircraft, Nadia had found her seat, 2A. She placed her bag beneath the ottoman with the ease of someone who had done it 10,000 times, which she had, and lowered herself into the seat. The leather adjusted around her. She closed her eyes for just a moment. Not relief, not even rest exactly, just the briefest pause, the kind you take when you have been holding yourself very carefully for a while and you need to remember what it feels like to not be performing stillness. Then she opened her eyes and reached for her laptop. The screen lit up. Columns of data, 12 airports, 12 audits, 11 findings she had not wanted to see. The numbers were clean and precise, and told a story that no amount of corporate language could soften. Passengers were being treated differently based on something that had nothing to do with their tickets, their behavior, or their right to be in the seats they had purchased. She was writing section 13 of the report when she heard the sound of heels behind her. Not the smooth movement of a flight attendant managing a service cart. Something sharper, more directional. She kept her eyes on the screen and her fingers moving, and she listened. In the galley just ahead and to the left, two voices were doing the thing voices do when they are trying not to be heard but still need to have the conversation. Pitched low but not low enough. Which one? Rachel Voss, 43 years old, lead flight attendant, uniform immaculate. 2A, Karen said. She had come up from the gate, which she should not have done, which was one of the things Nadia noted and added to the log she was keeping in her head. She gave me trouble at the gate. Something is off. Her ticket cleared, Rachel said. Tickets can be manipulated, and I have a Diamond Elite in 14 who has been with us for 11 years and never once got his upgrade. She has no loyalty status. A pause. Nadia could feel the quality of the silence, could feel Rachel looking down the aisle toward seat 2A, toward the woman sitting there with her back straight and her laptop open and her expression showing nothing. She does not look like trouble, Rachel said quietly. Karen's voice came back without hesitation. That is exactly what I am saying. Another pause. Different this time. This one had a decision inside it. What if she pushes back? Rachel asked. Then we escalate, Karen said. Say there is a seating error. We have a confirmed passenger who was supposed to have that seat. It happens. It does not happen like this, Rachel said, but her voice had already lost its resistance, the tone of someone who has made their objection and is preparing to be overruled by their own uncertainty. It happens if we say it does, Karen said. I have a platinum member who deserves that seat. Handle it. The sound of Karen's footsteps moving away. Then after a moment, the softer sound of Rachel's shoes on the carpet moving forward. Toward seat 2. Nadia finished typing the sentence she had started. One last number adjusted to reflect the morning's additions to the data set. Then she closed the laptop. She heard Rachel stop beside her. She did not look up immediately. She let the silence hold for exactly long enough, and then she raised her eyes. The jet bridge had its own particular quality of cold. Not the outdoor cold that came from temperature, but the sealed mechanical cold of a space that was not meant for lingering, only for passing through. The walls were close. The carpet was a dull gray that absorbed the fluorescent light overhead and gave nothing back. The sound was the hollow echo of footsteps on a metal floor that had no interest in warmth or welcome. Nadia had walked through hundreds of jet bridges. She had never once found comfort in any of them. She found clarity sometimes. This was one of those times. She walked at the same pace she always walked. Not hurried, not slow, just deliberate, the way you move when you know exactly where you are going and have decided not to be disturbed by the distance between here and there. Her left hand held the leather bag loosely at her side. Her right hand was empty. She was thinking about Karen Hollis, not about the boarding pass or the sizer or the extended inspection. Those were symptoms specific and documentable and already part of the file. She was thinking about the moment just before Karen's hand had gone up, the fraction of a second when a decision had been made that looked automatic but was not. The way assumption, when it has been running long enough, stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like perception. Like truth. Karen was not performing a prejudice. She was expressing one, which was in some ways much more interesting and much more dangerous because it meant the solution was not simply removing Karen Hollis. It meant finding every place the same assumption was being made by people who were equally certain they were not making it. 13 airports, 11 findings. This was how you found those places. You showed up without a title. You let the architecture of the assumption express itself, and then you documented it. Nadia stepped through the aircraft door. Rachel Voss was standing at the threshold, precisely positioned, her smile already in place. The warm, slightly customized welcome of a seasoned flight attendant who had learned that first-class passengers expected to feel recognized even when they had never met before. The man ahead of Nadia got the full version eye contact, slight incline of the head, a murmured welcome aboard. "Sir, seat 4A is right here on your right." Then Nadia stepped forward. The smile disappeared. Not gradually, not with any kind of transition. One moment it was there, professional, polished, practiced. And then Nadia was in front of her, and it was gone, replaced by something Rachel probably thought was neutral professionalism, but was actually a very specific kind of cooler attention. The kind that came with judgment already embedded in it. "Boarding pass," she said. Flat, clipped. No welcome aboard. No good morning. Just the word like a toll at a gate. Nadia held out her phone without comment. Rachel took it, gave it a glance that was a fraction shorter than it should have been. Not enough to verify, just enough to confirm the gesture of checking, and handed it back. Seat 2, A straight ahead, left side. No offer to assist with the bag, no mention of what was available in the cabin, just direction and dismissal. Nadia nodded once and moved past her. At the far end of the galley, almost invisible in the way that junior crew members sometimes made themselves when they were uncertain of their ground, Elena Reyes was arranging a service tray. She was 29, and she had the particular quality of attention that came from being very new, and very aware that being new meant watching everything carefully. She heard Rachel's tone when Nadia stepped through. She registered it. The difference between the man in 4A and the woman in 2A. The way one sentence had been warm and one sentence had been cold. The way the coldness was not about anything the woman had done in the 30 seconds she had been on the aircraft. Elena kept her hands moving on the tray. She did not say anything, but she started paying closer attention. Nadia found seat 2. A, the way she found every seat she had ever been assigned to without hesitation, without consulting anything, with the simple directness of someone who had done this enough times that the geography of aircraft cabins was as familiar as the layout of her own home. She placed the bag beneath the ottoman. It slid in cleanly, the same way it had slid into the sizer at the gate, requiring nothing of her but the motion itself. She settled into the seat. The leather was good. The width of the chair was right. Outside the window, the terminal was gray and overcast, the morning light thin and even, the kind of light that did not flatter anything but also did not hide anything. She closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Not relief, not peace, something more specific. The brief private acknowledgement that she was here, that the seat was hers, that everything that had happened at the gate and in the jet bridge was already part of the record, and that the next thing that happened would be part of the record too. Then she opened her eyes and reached for the laptop. The screen lit up and she was back inside the data. The numbers, the columns, the cross-references, the patterns that only became visible when you stopped looking at individual incidents and started looking at the space between them. The space where a system operated not through any single person's intention, but through the accumulated weight of 1,000 small decisions that each person made in perfect confidence that they were simply doing their job. She was typing the 3rd paragraph of Section 13 when she heard it. Karen's voice in the galley. Low, but not low enough. The words coming through with perfect clarity in the particular quiet of a pre-departure first-class cabin. She gave me trouble at the gate. Something is off. Handle it. Nadia finished her sentence. She let her fingers rest on the keyboard. She listened to Rachel's footsteps moving toward her. Then she closed the laptop, folded her hands lightly on top of it, and waited. In seat 3, B. Marco Rivera was already seated. He had put his bag overhead without incident, taken his seat without comment, and arranged himself in the slightly forward posture of someone who was alert without showing it. His phone was in his lap. The recording was running. He had made the decision in the jet bridge, not because he was certain yet of everything he had seen. He was precise about uncertainty. It was one of the reasons his channel worked. But because he had learned that the moments worth documenting were the ones that announced themselves clearly enough for you to know you would regret missing them. And this moment, with Karen Hollis's radio call and Rachel Voss's changed expression and the woman in seat 2, A sitting with a stillness that belonged to someone very deliberately choosing not to react, had announced itself clearly. He adjusted the angle. Steady. Whatever was going to happen next, he was going to catch it. Miss Brooks. Not a question, not a greeting. A summons delivered in the particular tone of someone who has already decided how the conversation ends and is simply opening the formality of beginning it. Nadia looked up from the closed laptop. Slowly, her gaze moved from Rachel's shoes, regulation recently polished, up to her face. The expression there was practiced into something that might read as professional concern if you were not looking carefully. If you were looking carefully, you saw the architecture beneath it, the decision already made, the justification being assembled in real time. Yes, Nadia said. Rachel clasped her hands lightly in front of her. A gesture designed to look open cooperative, the posture of someone bringing unfortunate news rather than enforcing a conclusion. There has been an issue with your reservation. This seat has been assigned to another passenger. I am so sorry for the inconvenience. Nadia let the sentence finish. Let a breath of silence follow it. I did not use an upgrade, she said. I purchased this seat, full fare, weeks ago. Rachel's expression did not change. Sometimes the system reflects things differently on our end. We have assigned you a new seat, row 36, middle position. I will have someone assist you with your... You are asking me to move, Nadia said. The sentence was flat, informational rather than emotional. From a confirmed first-class seat to the back of the aircraft, to a middle seat, it is standard procedure when there is a no. The word was not loud. It was not dramatic. It arrived in the cabin the way a door closing arrives, with a sound that is entirely ordinary, but somehow signals that something has become final. Rachel stopped speaking. The man across the aisle who had been pretending to read stopped pretending. In seat 3, B. Marco's thumb did not move. I am not moving, Nadia said. The silence that followed was the specific kind that forms when someone says something that should have ended the conversation but instead has made it more complicated. Rachel was used to hesitation. She was used to protest's frustration, the escalating pitch of someone who was upset, but ultimately going to comply because the social pressure of an aircraft of uniforms and authority and the ambient expectation of compliance was usually enough. She was not used to this. A single word delivered with such complete absence of doubt that it did not feel like defiance at all. It felt like information, as if Nadia had simply reported a fact about the physical world. Karen stepped forward from the galley where she had been waiting. She should not have still been on the aircraft. This too was a violation she had not considered a mistake she was adding to the accumulating record without knowing it. Miss Brooks. Karen said, her voice dropping into something that managed to sound both sympathetic and immovable. We have been very patient. If you are not willing to cooperate, we will need to contact ground security. Nadia looked at her. Really looked. The same look she had given the bag sizer the inspection, the radio call, the look of someone documenting. Call them, she said. Karen blinked. Excuse me? If you are going to make a mistake, Nadia said, do not hesitate. Call them. In the galley, just past the reach of most passengers' sight lines, Elena Reyes had pulled up the flight manifest on the small crew tablet. She had done it quietly without drawing attention the way she did most things, efficiently without announcement. The screen came back quickly with exactly what she had suspected it would come back with. Brooks, Nadia M., Seat 2, A, First Class, Purchased, Confirmed, no flags, no notes, nothing that suggested anything other than a passenger who had paid for a seat and was sitting in it. She stood in the galley doorway. Rachel was talking again, the tone sharpening now into something that had stopped pretending to be apologetic. Karen had her radio in her hand, and the woman in seat 2A was sitting with the kind of stillness that Elena had never seen in a passenger being told to move. Not rigidity, not anger, just an absolute and unshakable comfort in her own position that made the people demanding she leave look somehow like the ones who were out of place. Elena stepped out. Her boarding pass cleared, she said. Her voice was quieter than Rachel's and Karen's had been, but it carried. I checked the manifest. Seat 2. A is confirmed in her name, purchased not upgraded. There is no seating error. Rachel turned. Her eyes were sharp now, the professional warmth entirely gone. Elena, this is not your concern. She is a passenger on this aircraft, Elena said. That makes her my concern. Karen stepped closer. You are going to want to be very careful here. Elena met her eyes. She had been working for 14 months. She knew what careful looked like when it was being used as a threat. I am being very careful, she said. I am being careful about the facts. The facts are that this passenger's seat is confirmed. Her pass is valid and there is no legitimate reason for this conversation. The cabin had gone very still. In seat 3, B, Marco had shifted forward, barely the phone angled slightly upward now to capture Elena's face alongside Rachel's. Patricia Cole in seat 1C had set down her floral scarf and was watching with the focused patient attention of a woman who had spent 3 decades learning to tell the truth from the version of it that was designed to look like truth. Rachel's jaw tightened. She turned to the radio at her belt and pressed the call button. Her voice when she spoke had dropped all pretense of the sympathetic flight attendant and become something harder, more official, the tone of someone invoking authority rather than exercising it. Forward cabin to terminal security. We have a non-compliant passenger in first class, seat 2A, refusing crew instructions, requesting immediate assistance. Each word was precise. Each word was misleading, and each word was recorded by the compliance monitoring system running quietly in the background of the entire flight, a system that had been running since the moment the passenger in seat 2A had boarded the aircraft. Nadia heard every word. Her hands resting in her lap were completely still. Her breathing was even. Her face showed nothing except the very slight, very controlled expression of someone listening to a piece of music she had heard before and was now paying attention to with different ears. She already knew what came after the radio call. She had sat through the version of this moment before. Different aircraft, different people, same shape. She had learned something from each of those versions. She had learned that the moment they reached for the radio was the moment the real situation revealed itself, because up until then there was always the possibility that they were simply confused, simply mistaken, simply doing a bad job. But reaching for the radio was a choice. It was the moment confusion became decision, and decisions had consequences that confusion did not. The footsteps came quickly, heavy, certain the kind that were designed to communicate authority before the person was even visible. Travis Meade filled the gap at the head of the first-class cabin with the practiced authority of someone who had never doubted the effectiveness of his own presence. He was followed by 2 junior officers. He looked at Karen. She gave a short, firm nod. He looked at Rachel, who gestured toward seat 2A. He turned his attention forward and found Nadia Brooks looking back at him with an expression so untroubled that it stopped him for just a fraction of a second. Not long enough for anyone to call it a hesitation, but long enough for Marco Rivera's camera to catch it. The slight recalibration. The moment when the person who was used to arriving as a solution encountered something his experience had not prepared him for. He recovered, squared his shoulders, moved forward. "Ma'am, grab your belongings. You are getting off this plane." No introduction, no explanation. On what grounds, Nadia said. Failure to comply with crew instructions, interfering with boarding operations. "I have been sitting in my seat," Nadia said. Which of those describes that Travis leaned slightly forward? His voice dropped into the lower register he used when he wanted to make clear that the conversation was almost over. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." "I have heard that before," she said. 10 seconds, Travis said. The number landed in the cabin like something physical. Marco tightened his grip on the phone. Patricia's hand rested on the armrest of seat 1C. Elena, still standing in the galley doorway, felt the air change. Travis counted. Not out loud. Under his breath, a rhythm for himself, a structure for authority that was already starting to feel less stable than it should. He took one step closer. His hand moved to the vicinity of his belt without quite touching it. "You think this is a game," he muttered. Nadia looked up at him. I think she said, her voice perfectly level. "You are about to make a very expensive mistake." "I have heard that before, too." "No," Nadia said. "You have not." Something passed between them in the silence that followed. Not visible, but real. Travis felt it without being able to name it. The certainty that had filled the aisle when he walked in was not as solid as it had been. The woman in front of him was not behaving like any of the non-compliant passengers he had removed from aircraft in 14 years of this job. She was not afraid. She was not performing courage, which was what defiance usually looked like. She was simply present, entirely unshakably present, as if the situation itself, the officers, the officials, the countdown, was something she had already accounted for and found manageable. "Officers." Travis snapped, not taking his eyes off Nadia. "Go ahead." The two junior officers moved forward, hands extending, arms reaching, and then Elena Reyes walked out of the galley and stood between them and Nadia. "Stop." One word, not loud, but placed with such precision in the silence that both officers froze. Their hands hovered in the air, inches from contact suspended. Travis's head turned. "Step aside, Elena." "I will not," Elena said. "Her seat is confirmed. I verified it 3 minutes ago. There is no legitimate reason for this removal." Karen's voice came from behind. "Elena, you are going to lose your job over this." "Then I lose my job," Elena said. The cabin was completely silent. In seat 1C, Patricia Cole folded her hands in her lap. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the forward section. "Young man," she said, looking at Marco. "Keep filming." Marco did not answer. He did not take his eyes off the scene, but the phone did not move either. Nadia looked at Travis. Her voice, when she spoke, was the quietest it had been all morning, but it was the sentence that would matter. "Before you put your hands on me," she said, "I would suggest you verify who I am, because whoever told you I do not belong in this seat, they were wrong about more than just the seat." Travis Meade turned to Rachel. "Is there a pilot on board?" "Captain Okafor is in the cockpit," Rachel said. Travis looked at Nadia one more time. Then he turned and walked toward the front of the aircraft, his footsteps heavier than they had been when he arrived. The cabin sat in the weight of what had just happened. Nadia placed her hands lightly in her lap, fingers interlaced. She waited. "Before we go any further, I want to stop and ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room where the decision about who you were had already been made before you opened your mouth, where the facts kept coming back clear and confirmed, and it did not matter, because the conclusion had already been written, and the facts were just noise that needed to be managed? Drop your city in the comments. Tell me if you have been in that room, And if this story is hitting somewhere real for you, hit subscribe, because what happens when that cockpit door opens is something I do not want you to miss. The first time Nadia Brooks understood what she was up against, she was 27 years old. It was Chicago, a conference hotel, the kind of place where every surface was polished to within an inch of its life, and the lobby smelled like money trying to smell like restraint. Nadia was attending an investment conference, not as a guest, as a presenting participant. She had been invited by the managing director of the firm hosting it after he had read a paper she had written on infrastructure financing models. She had a folder under her arm with her presentation materials. She was wearing a blazer almost identical to the one she was wearing right now. She walked through the lobby toward the elevators. A security guard stepped out. "This floor is for registered guests and invited attendees only. I am an invited attendee," Nadia said. "Nadia Brooks, Meridian Ventures." The guard's eyes ran from the folder to her face and back. Something ran behind his expression that was not suspicion exactly. It was the application of a template, a category, a slot in his mental filing system that she had been placed into before she said a word. "I will need to verify that. Wait here." She waited. 7 minutes. She watched 3 men, all in suits similar to or less expensive than her blazer, walk past the guard and into the elevator without being asked a single question. The guard did not look at them. He looked at her at intervals the way you look at something you are keeping an eye on. When he came back, his expression had not changed. The verification had come back positive. She was on the list. She had been on the list the entire time. "You can go up now," he said. No apology. No acknowledgement of the 7 minutes of the 3 men who had walked past without being checked of the specific quality of the waiting she had just been made to do. Just the information, "You may proceed now." She stepped into the elevator alone. The doors closed, and for the length of time it took to rise 12 floors, she let herself feel it. Not the anger which she had learned to metabolize into something more useful, but the exhaustion underneath it. The specific bone-deep tiredness of being right about something you desperately wish you were wrong about. She had been told explicitly and implicitly by well-meaning people throughout her career that she was reading too much into things, that the delays and the extra questions and the second looks were procedural, not personal, that the system was neutral if you engaged with it correctly. She had spent the elevator ride from the lobby to the 12th floor, deciding something. When the doors opened, she stepped out and walked into the conference room where the managing director was waiting. She shook his hand. She gave her presentation. She answered every question with the precision that had been trained into her by years of needing to know more than whoever was in the room with her, because knowing more was the only margin that consistently worked. After the conference, in the back of a car going to the airport, she opened her notebook. She wrote 3 words. Fix the system. Not as a slogan, not as something she planned to put on a wall. As a task. A specific, bounded, addressable task with inputs and outputs, and a methodology that could be built if you had enough patience and enough data and enough willingness to show up again and again in rooms that had not decided yet whether to let you in. She was working on that task right now. In seat 2A, waiting for the cockpit door to open. Travis Meade was not a man who moved quickly when he was uncertain. Uncertainty in his experience was something you covered with momentum. You moved fast enough that nobody had time to look at the gap between your authority and your actual knowledge of the situation. He walked toward the cockpit with the same posture he had used to walk down the aisle. Shoulders squared, jaw-set boots hitting the carpet with the rhythmic certainty of someone who had decided where he was going. But inside the walk, something had changed. Inside the walk, the conversation he had just had was still running, playing back in fragments he could not quite organize. "Before you put your hands on me, I would suggest you verify who I am." He replayed it because it did not fit any of the categories he used to sort passengers. Passengers who were upset said they would call lawyers. Passengers who were frightened went quiet or cried. Passengers who were entitled got louder. More demanding invoked their status, their frequent flyer numbers, their connections to the airline's management. The woman in 2A had done none of those things. She had simply made a suggestion, as if verifying her identity was an obvious step that he had, through some oversight, neglected to take, as if she had a reasonable expectation that the outcome of such verification would be significant. Travis was not sure what to do with that. He knocked twice on the cockpit door. Captain James Okafor had been with Meridian Air for 17 years. He was 52 years old, a trim man with close-cropped gray at his temples, and the particular quality of focused stillness that distinguished pilots who were very good at their jobs. Not the absence of awareness, but the compression of it, everything running at a lower temperature because the capability to manage it was established and did not need to be performed. He was reviewing a pre-departure systems check with his first officer when the knock came. He finished the line he was reading, noted the position on the checklist, and said, "Come in." Travis entered, and Okafor recognized immediately, from the set of the man's shoulders, from the pace of his entry, from the way his eyes moved to Okafor and then away, that this was someone managing more uncertainty than his posture was admitting to. Captain Travis said, "I need your authorization for a passenger removal, first-class seat 2A. "What is the situation?" Okafor asked. "Non-compliant passenger. She has been refusing crew instructions, holding up boarding, causing a disturbance." Okafor set the clipboard on his knee. "Did she threaten anyone?" Travis paused. The pause was small, but Okafor was very good at noticing small things. "She is being hostile." "What exactly did she do?" he asked. "She refused to move from her seat." Gate agent flagged an issue with her ticket. Crew tried to resolve it. She pushed back. Pushed back how? Verbally. She kept questioning things, citing policy. A slight edge entered Travis's voice. The edge that appeared when someone who was used to authority encountered a challenge they could not immediately categorize, acting like she knew more than the crew. Okafor looked at him for a moment. Was her boarding pass valid? Travis blinked. The gate agent indicated there was a concern. Was the boarding pass valid? A longer pause this time. "I did not personally verify it." Okafor was quiet. Then he said carefully, "You responded to a removal request for a first-class passenger without verifying her boarding pass." Travis straightened. The gate agent had 22 years of experience. "I trusted her. Read on the situation." Okafor did not reply immediately. He reached to the side of the cockpit and pulled the flight tablet from its mount. He scrolled to the passenger manifest. He found 2A. He looked at the name, Brooks Nadia M. He looked at it again. Because in the last 6 months, James Okafor had received 3 internal communications from the Corporate Compliance Office, not standard circulars, specific, carefully worded notes flagged to senior crew staff at Meridian Air's highest traffic hubs. The notes described an ongoing review of passenger services operations, unannounced, conducted at the executive level. The name of the review's lead was not included in the general communication, but the title was Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Air Holdings. Okafor navigated to the restricted file access panel on the secured terminal. He entered his authorization code. The screen opened. VIP override. Covert audit. Status. Brooks Nadia M. Chief Executive Officer. Majority shareholder 61%. Meridian Air Holdings. Covert audit in progress. Do not alert staff. For a moment, James Okafor sat completely still, not in shock. In the controlled, precise way of someone absorbing information that changes everything about a situation without changing any of the facts that had already occurred. The facts were the same. The boarding pass had been valid. The seat had been confirmed. The passenger had been compliant. Elena had verified the manifest. Everything that had happened had been preventable. It was already done. He turned to look at Travis Mead. "Travis," he said. His voice was level, but it had a quality it had not had before. The quieter, more specific authority of someone who no longer needed to manage uncertainty because they understood the situation completely. "Do you know what you have been doing out there?" Travis frowned. He had expected at this point to be getting authorization for the removal. He had not expected a question. "I have been following protocol, Captain. I received a removal request from the lead flight attendant, the passenger in seat 2A. Okafor said is the majority shareholder of this airline." The sentence landed without drama, without volume. It was simply a fact delivered in the tone of someone who has stopped managing the complexity of a situation and has arrived at its center. Travis stared at him. "She holds 61% of Meridian Air Holdings." Okafor continued. "She has been conducting unannounced audits of our operations for 8 months. Today is the 13th audit, and you just threatened to physically remove her from an aircraft she owns." Travis's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "The gate agent flagged her without cause," Okafor said. "The lead flight attendant fabricated a seating error without cause. You responded to a removal request without verifying a single piece of information." He paused. "You had a junior crew member telling you the manifest was clear. You ignored her." Travis started. "You were not following protocol," Okafor said. The words came without heat, which made them worse somehow than anger. "Protocol requires verification. Protocol requires de-escalation before removal. Protocol requires authorization from the pilot in command, which you came here to get, which means you know that which means you knew before you started the countdown that you did not have what you needed." A pause. "You were following assumption, Travis? And there is a very significant difference." Travis's hands had gone slack at his sides. The clipboard he had been holding tilted the paper sliding slightly. "Give me your badge," Okafor said. Travis looked down. The badge at his belt. 14 years, the lanyard his wife had given him when he made head of security, the laminate worn soft at the corners from handling. He unclipped it. It took slightly longer than it should have because his hands were not entirely cooperating. He placed it in Okafor's extended hand. "Stay here," Okafor said. He turned to the cockpit door. He opened it. He stepped into the cabin. The energy in the first-class cabin when Captain Okafor walked out was like a weather system shifting. Nothing visible changed. The lighting was the same. The hum of the engines was the same. But every person in the forward section felt it. The way you feel the drop in pressure before a storm, not with your eyes, but with something older and more accurate. Okafor walked with the specific quality of someone who knew what they were walking toward and had decided how to approach it. Not hurried, not heavy, just sure. He did not look at Rachel, did not acknowledge Karen, did not pause at the galley. He walked straight to seat 2A. He stopped. He and Nadia Brooks looked at each other for exactly 3 seconds. The cabin did not breathe. In those 3 seconds, Marco Rivera's phone caught something that would later be replayed more times than any other moment in the footage, the specific quality of Nadia's face in the instant before Okafor spoke. She did not look triumphant. She did not look relieved. She looked like someone who had been holding a very heavy thing for a very long time and could see for the first time the surface where she was going to be able to set it down. Not relief yet, just the sight of the surface. Okafor brought his hand up. A salute. Clean. Formal. Not performative. The specific structured salute of someone offering recognition in the only language the situation called for. "Ma'am," he said, "I am Captain James Okafor. On behalf of this flight deck, I would like to personally welcome you aboard your aircraft." "Your aircraft." The bag Rachel Voss had been holding fell. It hit the galley floor with a flat plastic sound that was somehow the loudest thing that had happened all morning. Karen Hollis gripped the edge of the partition. Her knuckles went white. In seat 1, C, Patricia Cole placed her hand over her mouth. In seat 3, B, Marco Rivera's phone was not shaking. He had gone entirely still, the stillness of someone who understood that the moment he was capturing was beyond anything he had expected to document when he boarded this flight. Nadia looked at Captain Okafor. "Thank you, Captain," she said. Her voice was smooth, controlled. But underneath it, something shifted. The weight she had been carrying in perfect stillness for the last 40 minutes settling into a different position now. Not gone, just redistributed into something she could manage differently. "I appreciate your professionalism. It appears you are one of the few who reviewed the briefing." "Yes, ma'am," he said. 2 words, but they meant I am sorry for the ones who did not. Nadia unbuckled her seatbelt. The soft click of the buckle releasing sounded in the total silence of the cabin like something final. She stood. Nadia Brooks was 34 years old the first time she sat at the head of a boardroom table as the majority shareholder of Meridian Air Holdings. She had bought the controlling stake 9 months earlier. The acquisition had been structured over 14 months of negotiations, legal, financial, strategic, conducted with the precision and patience of someone who had learned that the most important deals did not feel like deals while they were happening. They felt like a very long conversation in which you were always the most prepared person in the room, even when, especially when, nobody believed that yet. There were 11 people in the boardroom that day. Nadia was the only woman, the only person of color. The presentation she gave was 47 minutes long and covered 5 years of operational data, 2 competing acquisition models, 3 alternative financing structures, and a forward-looking performance analysis that her team had spent 6 weeks building. It was by any objective measure the most thoroughly documented presentation that Boardroom had seen in the previous decade. Halfway through, a man named Richard Hale, 58 years old, CFO Emeritus, the kind of man who had been in that particular room so many times that he had stopped distinguishing between knowing things and simply being confident, leaned toward the man beside him and said in a voice pitched low but not low enough, "Who approved this acquisition? She does not look like she knows what she is walking into." The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when something true and terrible has been said in front of witnesses. Not the silence of agreement, but the silence of 10 people deciding simultaneously not to be the person who addresses it. Nadia set down her pen. She looked at Richard Hale, not with anger, with the focused, specific attention she gave to every problem she intended to solve. "I approved it," she said. "I have read every line of every contract in this folder, Mr. Hale, including the section on governance rights, which is relevant here." She picked the pen back up. "We have a 9 o'clock call with the Dubai investors in 3 minutes. I will need to know before I dial in, are you going to be useful on that call, or should I proceed without you?" Richard Hale opened his mouth. He closed it. Nadia dialed in. The meeting continued. Richard Hale submitted his resignation 11 weeks later. He said in his farewell email to the senior team that he was leaving to pursue other interests. Nobody in the boardroom asked Nadia what she thought about it. She did not offer an opinion. She simply scheduled the search for his replacement and moved on because there were 37 other things requiring her attention, and the thing she had learned over the course of becoming the person she was that the best response to someone underestimating you was never anger. It was precision. It was preparation. It was knowing at every moment more than anyone expected you to know, and being willing to demonstrate that knowledge in the exact, specific, unavoidable way that left no room for the assumption to survive. She had been doing that all morning. At gate K22 and in the jet bridge and in seat 2A through the countdown and the radio call and the security officers with their hands reaching toward her. She had been doing the thing she had learned to do, staying in the room, knowing what she knew, and letting the truth catch up. It had caught up. Now she was standing. From the front of the cabin, the sound of Okafor's footsteps had stilled. From somewhere behind, the sound of Travis Meade emerging from the cockpit. Slower, different, the footsteps of someone whose center of gravity had shifted. Nadia adjusted the blazer across her shoulders. The same small, precise motion she made every time she stood up to address something that mattered. The cabin was waiting. She was ready. The moment James Okafor stepped back into the cabin, he understood something that he had been circling for 17 years without quite landing on. He had seen dozens of passenger conflicts in his career. Escalations, de-escalations, removals, refusals, the whole spectrum of what happened when authority met friction in the pressurized aluminum tube of a commercial aircraft. He had been called out of the cockpit for situations that turned out to be nothing, and for situations that turned out to be something, and for everything in between. What he had not seen in 17 years was a passenger who had just had 2 armed security officers move toward her and a lead flight attendant fabricate a seating error and a gate agent extend an unnecessary screening, and who was sitting in a state of such complete self-possessed stillness that it made everyone else in the situation look like they were the ones who were confused. He had thought when he read the name on the restricted file that the revelation would change everything about his understanding of the morning. What he found walking back into the cabin was that it had changed only one thing. Now he had an explanation for what he had already seen clearly without it. The stillness. The precision. The absolute absence of the panic or the performance that characterized almost every other non-compliant passenger he had encountered. The way she had quoted de-escalation protocol to Travis, not aggressively, not as a power move, but as if she was genuinely curious whether he was aware that the policy existed. She had known what she was doing all morning. She had always known. He reached seat 2A and stopped. Behind him, he was aware of the specific quality of the cabin's silence. Not the silence of people who have lost interest, but the silence of people who are so completely focused that they have forgotten to make the ambient noise that humans normally make when they are present in a group. No rustling, no shifting, no quiet conversations in the back rows. Just complete, still attention directed at the front of the aircraft. He brought his hand up in the salute. It was not something he had planned. It was something that happened because it was the right thing, the only thing that adequately acknowledged what the situation actually was. He was the captain of an aircraft whose owner had just been threatened with physical removal from her own seat. The salute was not ceremony, it was accuracy. "Ma'am, I am Captain James Okafor. On behalf of this flight deck, I would like to personally welcome you aboard your aircraft." Rachel Voss heard the words from the galley, and the sound that followed the words, or rather, the sound that did not follow them, the vast, spreading silence of a cabin absorbing a revelation, was something she would remember for the rest of her life. Not the words themselves. The silence. Because the silence told her before her mind had fully processed what the words meant, that something irreversible had just happened. That the situation had passed through a door that did not open from the other side. She looked at Karen. Karen was gripping the partition with both hands now. Her face had done something Rachel had never seen it do in 3 years of working with her. It had gone completely blank. Not the controlled blankness of someone managing their expression. The empty blankness of someone whose entire internal framework for understanding a situation has just stopped working. Karen had spent 22 years trusting her instincts. 22 years in which her read on a situation had been the most reliable thing she possessed, the credential she valued above all others, the evidence she cited when she needed to justify a decision that the facts were insufficiently supporting. Her instincts had told her at gate K22, with complete and unshakable conviction that the woman in the simple blazer with the scuffed shoes and the worn leather bag did not belong in seat 2A. Her instincts had been wrong in the most complete and documented way possible. She stood at the edge of the galley and could not make herself move. Travis Meade emerged from the cockpit and stood at the forward edge of first class. He was very still. The two junior officers beside him had the specific quality of people who are trying not to be noticed. Their hands at their sides, their eyes not quite focusing on anything, the body language of people who have just understood that they were part of something they should not have been part of and are hoping the understanding is retroactive. Travis looked at Nadia Brooks, standing in the aisle. He looked at her the way you look at something when the story you had been telling yourself about it has just been replaced by a different story, and the two versions are competing in your field of vision simultaneously. The old version and the true version, both of them vivid, neither of them comfortable. He had given this woman a 10-second countdown. He had told her in front of 100+ passengers and a recording device he had not noticed that they could do it the easy way or the hard way. He had been 14 years in security, and he had always operated from the conviction that his read on a person was reliable, that his training and his experience and his instinct for threat assessment made him a more accurate judge of situations than the paperwork. Standing at the forward edge of first class, watching Nadia Brooks adjust the blazer across her shoulders with the calm precision of someone who had always planned to stand here. Travis Meade understood something about his own instinct that he had not understood before. His instinct had not been assessing a threat. His instinct had been applying a template, and the template had been wrong. He looked at his belt where his badge had been. He looked at Captain Okafor's hand. The badge was there. He looked at the floor. In seat 1C, Patricia Cole had placed her hand over her heart. Not dramatically. Not for anyone watching, just the instinctive gesture of someone whose emotion has to go somewhere and has found the closest available anchor. She was thinking about the gate, about the moment she had seen Karen's hand go up and had felt the wrongness of it, and had not said anything, had turned toward the jet bridge and kept moving. She was 67 years old. She had been a school teacher for 31 years. She had taught her students consistently, and with the conviction of someone who believed it was the most important thing she could give them, that the moments when you stayed quiet were not neutral. That silence in the presence of something wrong was a kind of participation. She had not followed her own lesson this morning. She was not going to make that mistake again. In seat 3, B. Marco Rivera lowered his phone by a fraction. He had been holding it up for the last 20 minutes without his arm shaking, which was something he would think about later as an example of what focus could do. The footage was all there. Gate-to-aircraft screening to count down Elena in the galley doorway to this moment. He had not planned to film a story this morning. He had planned to document a layover and post a video about the best coffee spots in the O'Hare terminals. He was going to need to rethink his content schedule. Nadia stepped into the aisle. The space parted for her without anyone being asked. Passengers shifted seats, creaked the small adjustments of bodies, making room for something that was about to happen. Not out of fear, out of recognition. The instinctive understanding that a person was moving toward something that mattered and that the appropriate response was to get out of the way. She looked at Travis first. Travis did not look up immediately. His eyes were on the space somewhere between his feet and the galley. The particular gaze of someone who has lost the ability to find a neutral place to look because every available surface is now associated with something he would prefer not to examine. Mr. Meade. He looked up. The effort of it was visible. Not defiance, but the specific difficulty of meeting the gaze of someone you have badly misjudged when the misjudgment is now fully visible to everyone in the room. Nadia did not rush. "You gave me a countdown," she said. Not accusatory, factual, the tone of someone documenting rather than prosecuting. 10 seconds. Your exact words were, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Travis swallowed. I was acting on the information provided to me. The gate agent indicated there was a discrepancy. "You are the head of terminal security." He stopped. The sentence was not a question, and it was not a rebuke. It was a boundary, a line drawn around the territory that was his responsibility and his failure. "You assess threats," Nadia continued. "You verify information. You make independent judgments about the situations you are deployed to manage. You do not execute assumptions delivered by a gate agent without checking them." Travis opened his mouth, closed it. "You failed to verify my ticket," Nadia said. Each sentence arrived at the same pace, the same register. "You failed to request identification. You failed to review the manifest which was available to you. You failed to apply the de-escalation protocol that is the first step in any non-compliance situation." A pause. "You threatened a compliant passenger with physical force and unlawful removal." Travis's jaw worked slightly. Something was happening behind his expression. Not the hard certainty of someone defending a position they believe in, but the softer, more complicated process of someone who has been shown the distance between what they thought they were doing and what they were actually doing. "I did not know who you were," he said. The words came out smaller than he had intended. "You did not need to know who I was," Nadia replied. The words were quiet, but absolutely clear. "You needed to know whether the facts supported the action you were taking. They did not. That should have been enough." She let it settle. "Then, you are a liability to this company, and to every passenger who relies on your judgment." Travis did not look away. "Yes, ma'am. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties." She looked at Captain Okafor. "His badge has already been collected." Okafor nodded. Travis stepped to the side. Not escorted, not instructed. He simply moved the way people move when they understand that the space they have been occupying is no longer theirs. The cabin registered this moment the way it had registered everything else, not with noise, but with the specific quality of attention that comes from people watching something that is being made permanent in real time. Marco's camera was steady. Patricia's hand was in her lap. Elena was in the galley doorway watching with an expression that was very carefully neutral, holding itself in check until it understood how this was going to go. Nadia turned toward Rachel. Rachel was standing in front of the galley counter. She had not moved since the bag fell. She had retrieved the bag. That automatic gesture, the body doing something because the mind had temporarily shut down and the body needed a task. And now she was holding it in front of her at chest height like a small, insufficient shield. "Ms. Voss." Rachel flinched. Not dramatically. Just the small physical jolt of hearing her name in a voice that had not previously been directed at her from someone whose authority she had just spent 40 minutes attempting to negate. "Yes," she said. The word barely carried. "Yes, ma'am." Nadia took one step toward her. Just one. Not threatening. Simply closing the distance enough to make the conversation feel like a conversation rather than a public address. "When you walked past my seat," Nadia said, "and you saw me sitting there, what did you see?" Rachel opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "Because I know what you saw," Nadia said. "It was not an issue with a ticket. It was not a seating error. You saw someone who did not fit the image you had in your mind of who belongs in that seat. And then Karen called, and instead of checking the manifest, which you could have done in 30 seconds, you decided her read was more reliable than the data in your own system." Rachel's grip on the bag tightened. "I thought, she has so much experience, and when she said there was a concern, when the manifest came back clear, Nadia said, 'What did you do with that information?'" The question was a blade, simple, specific. Rachel could not answer it, because the answer was nothing. She had done nothing with it. She had looked at the clear manifest and kept moving toward the conclusion she had already chosen. You were not protecting this cabin, Nadia said. You were protecting an assumption. And when the facts disagreed with you, you called security instead of updating your position. Rachel's eyes filled. I have been with this company for 16 years. I know, Nadia said. That is in your file. So are 4 passenger complaints filed in the last 8 months, all of which describe a similar pattern of selective enforcement, all of which were marked resolved without investigation. Rachel went very still. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties. The bag slipped from Rachel's hands again. This time she did not pick it up. Karen Hollis had not moved from the partition. She was still standing in the exact position she had been in when Okafor walked out of the cockpit. Both hands on the edge of the partition knuckles, white chin at the angle she had maintained all morning, the posture of someone who believed their authority was a physical thing that could be preserved by not letting the body acknowledge what the mind was processing. But the chin had dropped. Just a fraction. Just enough, Ms. Hollis Nadia said. Karen stepped forward. The movement was automatic, 22 years of responding to situations by moving toward them. Then she stopped because the automatic response was designed for situations where she was the one with authority, and this was no longer that situation. I followed security protocol, Karen said. Her voice had lost its professional warmth and its cold authority and everything in between, and what was left was something raw and defensive. There was a concern about the reservation. The system confirmed my ticket 3 times, Nadia said. Systems can. But you were not relying on the system, Nadia said. You decided before the system had a chance to tell you anything. And then you used the system to try to build a case for a conclusion you had already reached. Karen's mouth pressed together. I have been doing this job for 22 years. My read on situations. Your read, Nadia said, has 11 complaints attached to it in the last 18 months. She let that land before continuing. All from passengers of color, all marked resolved. None of them investigated. The cabin was very quiet. Patricia Cole in seat 1C had gone very still. Karen's hands released the partition. Her arms dropped to her sides. The posture she had maintained all morning, rigid, certain, immovable, sagged not in a collapse but in the specific way that happens when the framework holding something upright is removed. Effective immediately, Nadia said, you are relieved of your duties. The 3 of them stood in the forward section of Meridian Air Flight 408. Travis Meade off to the side, badge-gone arms at his sides. Rachel Voss with the dropped bag on the floor beside her feet. Karen Hollis with her arms hanging and her chin at last level. And the cabin held the specific quality of a space in which something has been concluded. But Nadia was not finished. She turned toward the galley. Elena Reyes stepped out. She moved carefully the way you move when you are not certain what you are stepping into when the situation is bigger than anything you expected to be part of today, and you are managing the gap between what you did and what you are going to be asked about. Nadia looked at her directly. You checked the manifest, she said. Yes, ma'am. You told Ms. Voss the seat was confirmed and the boarding pass was valid. Yes. And when she told you to stay out of it, Elena paused. The question required an honest answer, and Elena was the kind of person who gave honest answers, even when they were complicated. I stopped for about 30 seconds. Then I did not. Nadia was quiet for a moment. Why Elena looked at her? Because she had not done anything wrong, and they were wrong about everything, and I had verified the data, and I knew I had verified it, and I could not. She stopped. Started again. I could not make myself stand there and not say anything, even knowing what it might cost you. It was not a question. Elena heard it as a question and answered it anyway. I knew what it might cost me, she said. I decided it was worth it. Nadia looked at her for another moment. Then she reached into the laptop bag and took out her phone. She opened a notes application and typed something. A name, a date, a reference number. Specific, documented. She put the phone away. "You will be hearing from corporate in the next 48 hours, she said. "It will not be what you are expecting." Elena did not ask what that meant. She simply nodded, and Nadia moved on. Patricia Cole had stood up from seat 1C. She had not been asked to. No one had called on her. She simply stood the way she had spent 31 years standing up in front of classrooms full of children who needed someone to be upright and clear, and looked at Nadia from a distance of 4 feet. "I saw it at the gate," she said. "The whole thing. And I did not say enough." "You said something when it mattered," Nadia replied. "I should have said something earlier." Patricia's voice was steady, but the honesty in it cost something. "When she took your phone, that was wrong, and I knew it was wrong, and I kept moving." Nadia looked at her for a moment, not with reassurance and not with judgment, just with the particular quality of someone who is receiving information and taking it seriously. "It is not easy," Nadia said, "to put yourself between someone else's conflict and your own comfort. Most people do not." "You did," Patricia said. "You sat there for 40 minutes and you never moved." Nadia shook her head slightly. "I had something on my side that most people do not." Patricia waited. "I already knew how it ended," Nadia said. "I have been here before. I know what the room looks like when it is closing in, and I know how long it lasts, and I know what comes after it if you do not move." A pause. Most people have not had that many chances to practice. Patricia was quiet. Then she said, "I will practice." Something in Nadia's expression shifted, small, barely perceptible, but it was there. The slight softening that comes when something is said that is exactly true and arrives at exactly the right moment. "That is all any of us can do," she said. She turned back toward the cabin, not to Rachel and Karen and Travis. Their portion of this was complete. The record made the decisions rendered. She turned to address the space itself. The people in first class and the ones near enough in the forward section to hear. The man who had whispered, "What did she even do?" And the woman who had answered nothing, "She is just sitting there." Marco Rivera, who had been recording since the gate and would need to decide before this plane landed what he was going to do with that footage. What happened today, Nadia said, did not start with a bad ticket scan or a misread boarding pass. It started before I reached the counter. She let that settle. It started with a decision that was made about me before a single fact was available. A decision made in a fraction of a second based on something that had nothing to do with my ticket, my behavior, or my right to be in that seat. The cabin listened. That decision then produced a chain of actions, each one escalating, each one justified by the one before it, each one making it harder for anyone inside the chain to stop and ask whether the original decision was accurate. She paused. Nobody stopped to ask. She looked briefly at Elena. Almost nobody. Elena stood very straight. "I am not telling you this because I want to make an example of anyone," Nadia continued. "I am telling you because what happened today was not an exception. It was a pattern. And patterns do not change by removing individuals. They change when enough people, in enough moments, in enough ordinary situations, exactly like this one, decide that stopping to ask the question is worth the discomfort of the pause." Patricia Cole sat down, not because the speech was over, because she needed to be sitting for the weight of what she was feeling. Marco lowered the phone an inch, not to stop recording, just because his arm had remembered that it was an arm and not a tripod. Nadia turned back to the forward section. "Captain," she said, "I would like replacement crew dispatched. This flight does not push back until they are on board." Okafor. "Already requested, ma'am. 15 minutes. Nadia nodded once. Then she turned to Rachel and Karen and Travis. "You will gather your belongings," she said. "You will exit the aircraft. Your union representatives will be notified HR will follow up within 24 hours, and there will be a full review of all complaint records associated with each of your tenures. She looked at Karen specifically, including the 11 that were closed without investigation. Karen closed her eyes, just for a second, the movement of someone absorbing an impact that was real and earned and not going to diminish. You can go, Nadia said. Rachel moved first. She picked up the bag from the floor, the same bag that had fallen twice, that she had retrieved twice, that had become in the last 40 minutes a strange anchor for everything she was trying to hold together. She clutched it to her chest and walked toward the front of the aircraft without looking at anyone. Her eyes were fixed on the door. The jet bridge, the way out. Her steps were even. She was holding herself together with everything she had. She made it to the door and through it without incident. Karen followed. She walked with her chin back at its normal angle. Not defiance, just the habit of 22 years, the posture so deeply ingrained it continued even when everything else had stopped. She did not look at the passengers as she passed. She did not look at Nadia. She looked at the door and she walked toward it, and she did not stop. Travis was last. He walked with his eyes down. He did not have a badge to touch any longer. No lanyard, no laminate worn soft at the corners. His hands were empty at his sides. He walked the length of the aisle, and the aisle opened for him the way aisles open for people who are leaving. Not with respect, but with the neutral space of people who have somewhere else to put their attention now. When the aircraft door closed behind all three of them, the cabin released a sound. Not applause, not yet just the collective exhale of something being set down, something that had been held tightly for 43 minutes and was finally fully allowed to land. Then, from seat 3, B1 clap. And then another from the front row. And then they were all doing it. Not the loud theatrical applause of a performance, but the steady, measured sound of people acknowledging something that had asked something real of them, and that they were glad they had witnessed. Nadia did not bow, did not smile broadly. She nodded, once genuine brief, because the applause was not for her performance. It was for the truth. And the truth did not need a curtain call. She walked back to seat 2A. She sat down. She opened her laptop. She went back to work. The replacement crew arrived in 14 minutes. Nadia knew it was 14 because she had been tracking time with the same precision she tracked everything else, and because the specific quality of the cabin's silence during those 14 minutes was worth noting. Not uncomfortable, not impatient, but the particular silence of a space that has just undergone something significant and is taking the opportunity to absorb it. The new lead flight attendant's name was Daniel Reeves. He was 53 years old trim, with the kind of calm professional presence that did not need to announce itself. He stepped through the aircraft door, paused at the threshold in the way experienced crew members did, not hesitating, just taking in the room, and then moved forward. "Good morning, folks," he said. "Thank you for your patience. We will be taking care of you from here. No performance, no overcompensation, no warmth deployed selectively or withheld based on any calculation he was making about who in the cabin deserved it. Just even professional care distributed without preference." Nadia, who had not looked up from her laptop, noticed the tone. She made a note. Elena Reyes remained. That had been Okafor's call. Elena had been on the aircraft when the incident began. She had been the only crew member to act with integrity, and Okafor had confirmed with Nadia before the replacement crew boarded that Elena would continue the flight in her current role. Elena took up her position in the galley. Her hands were steady. Her face was composed, but she was moving in the slightly careful way of someone who is managing the gap between what they are feeling and what they are showing, which was a gap. Nadia understood very well from the inside. She let Elena work for 10 minutes. Then she pressed the call button. Elena came to the row. "Ma'am, water." "Please," Nadia said. Room temperature. Elena nodded and went to get it. When she came back and placed it on the tray table, Nadia looked up at her. How long have you known about the complaints? She asked. Elena's hand stilled on the tray edge. I am sorry. The ones that were closed. The ones that Karen and Rachel marked resolved without investigation. How long have you known they existed? Elena was quiet for a moment. Then I wrote one of them. Nadia set down her pen. Elena continued carefully, precisely the way she had done everything this morning. 3 months ago. A passenger. A woman she was traveling with her daughter, 8 years old. Karen flagged her ticket as suspicious. The woman's name was Diana Morse. She had bought the ticket 11 weeks in advance. It was a confirmed first-class seat, identical situation to today. Elena paused. I filed the complaint through the internal system with a time-stamped crew log and photos from the gate camera and a statement from 2 other passengers who had witnessed it. And Nadia said, 3 weeks later, I checked the status. Closed. Resolved. Insufficient evidence. Nadia looked at her. You had time-stamped logs, photographic documentation, and witness statements. Yes, ma'am. And it was closed as insufficient evidence. Rachel signed the closure form. The cabin was humming around them, the sound of the engines warming the small adjustments of a crew preparing to push back the particular auditory texture of a flight becoming real. Nadia sat in the center of it and looked at Elena Reyes, who had filed a complaint through the system that existed for exactly this purpose, done everything right, and watched it disappear. Why did you not escalate it further? Nadia asked. Elena met her eyes. Because I am 29 and I have been here 14 months. Because Rachel is my direct supervisor. Because I thought... She stopped. Then I thought if I used the system correctly it would work. It did not, Nadia said. No. And this morning, when Rachel told you to stay out of it, you had no reason to expect that this time would be different. Elena thought about this. No, I did not. But you stepped out anyway. Yes. Nadia was quiet. Then she picked up her pen and wrote something on the notepad beside the laptop. Not a number, not data. A name. Elena Reyes, the date, the flight number, and below it, in her own shorthand, a note that would make its way into a personnel recommendation that Elena would receive in 2 days and would take a week to stop rereading. You did good work today, Nadia said, simply, without decoration. Elena nodded. Her eyes were bright with something she was very carefully not letting become tears on a working aircraft. Thank you, ma'am. You can go, Nadia said, and then before Elena turned, do not stop, even when it costs you. Especially then. Elena went back to the galley. Marco Rivera had put his phone in his lap. He had been holding it up, steady recording, for the better part of an hour, and now that the immediate situation had resolved, he sat in seat 3B and looked at the footage on the playback screen and felt the specific, complicated weight of having documented something real. He had started the channel 4 years ago because he liked airports and cities, and the way travel felt like a kind of translation. Moving from one context into another, learning to read new spaces. He had not started it to be a witness to anything in particular. He had not signed up to be the person who caught the moment that needed catching. But here he was. The footage was all there. Gate K22. The boarding pass that cleared. Karen's hand going up. The extended inspection. The fabricated additional screening. The radio call to Rachel. The conversation in the galley that Nadia had heard and he had partially captured. Rachel's approach to seat 2, Elena stepping out. Travis and his countdown. Okafor's salute. All of it. He looked at the preview thumbnail on the upload screen. He looked at the footage for 30 more seconds. Then he uploaded it. No dramatic caption. Just the footage, the location, the date, and a title he had been composing in his head since the moment Okafor had said your aircraft. This happened on a real flight this morning. You should see it. He put the phone in his pocket and looked out the window at the tarmac. The aircraft was beginning to move. Patricia Cole had been quiet since Nadia sat back down. She was a woman who processed things deeply before speaking, who had learned over 67 years that the value of a response was directly related to the thought behind it, and she was thinking. She was thinking about the gate, about the moment she had seen Karen's hand go up and had felt the wrongness of it. Not vaguely, not as a possibility, but clearly, specifically, the way you feel something wrong when your experience has trained you to recognize its shape. She had felt it, and she had turned toward the jet bridge. She had kept moving. She was thinking about that choice. Not with guilt exactly. Guilt was too simple, too focused on the self. She was thinking about it with the specific kind of attention she had tried to teach her students to apply to the choices they made, without thinking what was the cost of that, to whom. And was it worth it? The cost had been real. Not to her. She had lost nothing by walking past, but to the woman in seat 2A who had then spent 43 minutes having every legitimate fact about her situation overridden by people who had decided the facts were less relevant than their sense of what was appropriate. Patricia had not caused that, but she had not interrupted it either. She was 67 years old, and she had lived long enough to know that there was a difference between causing harm and not preventing it, and also long enough to know that the difference mattered less at the end than you hoped it would. She pressed the call button. Elena came. "Would you mind," Patricia said, asking Miss Brooks, "if she has a moment? I would like to apologize." Elena paused. "I can ask." She went to 2A. A brief, quiet exchange. Then she came back. "She said she will come to you in a few minutes, if that is all right." "Of course," Patricia said. 4 minutes later, Nadia appeared at the row. Patricia looked at her. "I should have said something at the gate," she said, "specifically and directly, and in a way that cost me something." "I did not." Nadia looked at her. "You said something on the aircraft." "That was easier," Patricia said. "By then I had seen enough to be certain. At the gate I was only pretty sure, and I let pretty sure be a reason to keep walking." She paused. "I am 70 years old in 3 years. I am running out of time to keep waiting until I am certain." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "Pretty sure is enough," she said. "You do not need certainty to say something. You just need to decide that saying it matters more than the risk of being wrong." Patricia nodded. "I am going to remember that," good Nadia said, and she went back to her seat. The replacement crew had the aircraft ready to push back in 22 minutes. Not a significant delay given everything. Okafor informed the passengers over the intercom that they would be departing shortly, thanked them for their patience, and said nothing else. There was nothing else that needed to be said over the intercom. The rest had already been said. As the aircraft began to move, Daniel Reeves moved through the first-class cabin with drinks and warm towels, touching each row with exactly the same attentiveness, making no distinctions. A businessman in 4B who had watched the whole thing looked up when Daniel stopped at his row and said, "That was what we just saw. Was that really happening?" "Yes, sir," Daniel said simply. "And the woman in 2A. Can I get you anything?" Daniel said. Smooth, professional. The gentle, clear signal that some questions had answers that were better found elsewhere. The businessman accepted his drink. He thought about it for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and searched the name that Captain Okafor had spoken in the salute. His expression changed. He looked toward seat 2A. Nadia was looking at her laptop. The numbers were there, the columns, the data from 13 airports in 8 months. And now a section marked 13, which was going to be the most extensively documented of all of them, because she had notes and a compliance recording and a junior crew member's testimony and the passenger footage from seat 3B. And all of it said the same thing in different languages. The pattern was real. And now she had enough to do something about it. 40 minutes into the flight somewhere above Wisconsin, Elena came to row 2A again. She did not have a drink tray. She was off the service rotation for this portion of the cabin. She stood beside the seat and said quietly, "There is something else you should know." Nadia set down her pen. Elena spoke carefully. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Not nervously, just the posture of someone who has thought about what they are going to say and is delivering it with the same precision they would give anything important. 3 months ago, when I filed the complaint about Diana Morse, the woman and her daughter, I was not the only one who noticed what Karen did. There was a gate agent on the adjacent counter. His name is James Foley. He saw the same thing I saw. He did not file a complaint, but he mentioned it to his supervisor. Nadia waited. His supervisor was Rachel Voss, Elena said. The sound of the engines filled the space between sentences. The mention went nowhere. Elena continued. 2 weeks later, James Foley asked about it. Rachel told him the situation had been reviewed and found to be a training issue that had been corrected internally. Nadia said, "Was it?" "No," Elena said. "I checked. There is no record of any retraining. There is no record of the review. The only record is the closure notice on my complaint, which Rachel signed." Nadia was very still. "How do you know this?" she asked. "Because James Foley told me," Elena said. "He came to me after my complaint was closed. He was upset that nothing had happened. He said he had been thinking about whether to escalate it further and he did not know how." She paused. "I told him to wait. I said I was watching the situation. I thought if it happened again with documentation, it would be enough." "It happened again," Nadia said. "Today," Elena said. "Yes." The weight of that settled between them. Not the weight of surprise. Nadia was not surprised. She had built her entire 8-month audit program on the foundational understanding that the incidents she was documenting were not individual failures of individual people. They were nodes in a network of choices, people covering for each other, complaints disappearing, reviews that were not conducted, records that showed resolution where there had been none. She had known it when she built the program. But knowing something as data and sitting at 30,000 feet while a 29-year-old junior flight attendant tells you that she filed a complaint and watched it disappear and then showed up to work the next day and the day after that and the day after that, those were two different kinds of knowing. James Foley, Nadia said. "Yes, ma'am. He still works at O'Hare." "Yes." Nadia picked up her phone. She opened the email application. She typed a subject line. Meridian Air Audit. Finding 13 Escalation secondary witness identified. And in the body of the email she wrote the name, the date, the specific reference, and a brief summary of what Elena had just told her. She attached the compliance file that was already uploading from the aircraft's internal recording system. She sent it. Then she looked at Elena. "The review that is going to happen will include everyone in the chain," she said. "Not just the people on this aircraft this morning. Everyone who touched those complaints." Elena nodded. "That includes Rachel," Nadia said. "And it includes whoever closed Karen's other 11 records. All the way through." Elena said, "Good. Simple. No hesitation." Nadia looked at her. "Go back to work," she said. Elena went back to work. Nadia opened the audit file. Section 13 was already longer than sections 1 through 12 combined. She began writing the summary, not with anger, not with the adrenaline of someone who had just won something, with the focused, specific attention of someone doing a job that was not finished and would not be finished for a long time yet. The pattern was real. The record was complete. The chain was longer than this morning had revealed, and it wound through more files and more closed complaints and more people who had made the calculation that silence was a form of safety. She was going to follow it to the end. She always did. Karen Hollis drove home that afternoon still in her uniform. She did not notice until she was standing in her kitchen filling the kettle and caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the window above the sink. The gate agent badge was gone. That had happened on the aircraft in the moment when she had been told to gather her belongings. But the rest of it was still there. The pressed fabric, the company colors, the external markers of a job she had had for 22 years and would not have tomorrow or the day after, or in 3 years when she had once imagined herself retiring from it. She set the kettle down. She sat at the kitchen table and thought carefully and without flinching about what she had actually done that morning. Not what she had told herself she was doing, enforcing procedure, protecting standards, trusting her instincts, but what she had actually done. She had seen a woman at the gate who did not match the picture in her head of who belonged there, and she had built a case from that single starting point, and she had kept building when the evidence refused to support her, and she had made one phone call after another to recruit other people into the case she was building, and not once, not for a single moment, had she stopped and asked herself whether the starting point was accurate. She sat there for a long time. Rachel Voss wrote 3 different apology emails that night. The first was to the airline's HR department, which would receive it and file it, and it would become part of the review record. The second was to Elena Reyes, who would read it twice, and then not know what to do with it, because apologies that arrive after the damage has been absorbed are a specific kind of complicated. The third email she wrote to no one. She opened a blank message and typed and deleted and typed and deleted because the person she most needed to apologize to was Diana Morse, who had traveled with her 8-year-old daughter and had her ticket questioned and her presence challenged and her complaint filed and buried. And Rachel did not have Diana Morse's contact information and would not have known, even if she had, how to put into a message what had happened or why or what exactly she was sorry for, when the answer was all of it, the whole architecture of choices that had felt each time like reasonable professional judgments. Travis Meade sat in his car in the garage for 20 minutes before going inside. His wife found him there when she came out to check if he had arrived. She did not ask why he was sitting in the car. She just opened the passenger door and got in and sat with him, which was something she had learned to do in 20 years of being married to a man who needed time to move from one thing to the next. He told her what had happened, all of it, slowly, without editing. She listened. Then she said, "What are you going to do about it?" He did not have an answer yet. But the question was the right question, and he knew enough sitting there in the dark of the garage to recognize that. 6 weeks later, at Gate K-22 in O'Hare's terminal, a man named Marcus Webb approached the first-class boarding line wearing dark jeans and a faded hoodie, carrying a worn duffel bag over one shoulder. He was 38 years old. He had a confirmed first-class ticket on Meridian Air to Denver purchased 11 days ago, seat 2C. The gate agent who scanned his boarding pass was 26 years old. She had been through a new training program that had launched 4 weeks earlier. Not slides, not videos, but real scenario-based sessions that required participants to confront their own automatic assumptions about what different kinds of people looked like in different kinds of contexts. She had found it uncomfortable and useful in equal measure. She scanned Marcus Webb's pass. Green light. She looked up. She met his eyes. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Webb," she said. "Seat 2C is right down the jet bridge. They will get you settled. Can I help you with anything before you board?" Marcus looked at her for a moment. "No," he said. "I am good. Thank you." He walked through. He did not have to pause. He did not have to brace himself. He did not have to prepare the explanation he had rehearsed on the drive to the airport, The one that moved from the ticket number to the confirmation email to the phone call he had made to verify everything 3 days earlier just to be ready. He just walked through. That was the change. Not a policy on a wall. Not a press release. A man walking through a gate without having to prove he had earned it. Elena Reyes received her promotion letter on a Thursday. She read it twice before work and once on the train and put it in her bag and went to do the job. Her new title was lead cabin attendant. Her first act in the new role was to post the updated complaint protocol in the crew room. The one that included a direct escalation path that bypassed the layer of supervision that had buried the previous complaints. And to put her name and contact information at the bottom with the note, "If you see something, I will listen." 3 crew members came to her in the first week. 2 with things they had witnessed. 1 with something they had done and were ashamed of and did not know what to do with. She listened to all 3. Marco Rivera's footage crossed 4 million views in 38 hours. The clip that was replayed most often was not the moment of the salute, though, that circulated widely. It was not the moment the 3 were escorted off the aircraft, though that had its own arc. The clip that people returned to that was shared in messages between friends with the note watch this part was 3 seconds long. It was the moment just before Okafor spoke. When he stopped beside seat 2A, and he and Nadia looked at each other and the cabin went absolutely still. 3 seconds in which nothing happened visibly. No words, no movement, no dramatic gesture. Just a woman who had been sitting in her seat for 43 minutes, who had not flinched and not fled and not raised her voice and not done anything except exactly what she had the right to do, looking at the first person all morning who had walked toward her without already having decided what she was. Someone in the comments wrote, "She does not look relieved. She looks tired." The kind of tired that comes from being right too many times about things you desperately wish you were wrong about. That comment had 290,000 likes. Nadia did not read it. She was already on the next audit. There were 12 more airports on the list. She arrived early. She always did. She sat apart from the crowd, back straight, ankles crossed, and she watched. And she waited for the truth to make itself visible. It always did. If this story moved you, if you have ever been told you do not belong in a room you had every right to walk into, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Every share puts this story in front of someone who might be sitting exactly where Nadia sat, and who needs to know that staying still is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do. Hit the like button if you believe that truth, when you give it time, always catches up. It costs you nothing, and it tells this channel that stories like this one matter. And subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. We tell stories about real courage, quiet justice, and the moments when ordinary people refuse to move. Those stories deserve to be seen. Drop 3 words in the comments that describe what Nadia did when everyone in that cabin told her she did not belong. We read every single one. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sit still and let the truth catch up.